When you attend events, there's different ways to think about it. And I know a lot of people who go over there, they look at the crowd and they say, who here can do something for me? And I'm sorry to say, but if that's the way you think, you're thinking in the wrong way.
Have you been thinking about buying your first rental property for some time, or do you already own a bunch of properties? Well, fellow investors, you found the right location to listen and learn from others' successes. Welcome to The Very Real Estate Effect with your host, Axel Monsaingeon.
Hello, and welcome back to the Very Real Estate Effect podcast, a show dedicated to real estate investing right here in Quebec. Thank you for joining. Today, I have 3 tips to share with you. I was reflecting over the weekend of 3 items that have made a huge, significant difference in my investing journey, and I want to share them with you because I know you're a different stage of that investing spiral, real estate investing spiral, and regardless of where you're at, how many deals you've done, and the size of your portfolio, these will help you. This morning, I had breakfast with a gentleman that I met at an event, at a golf event to be specific. And we started chatting. After a few minutes, we realized that we had plenty of points in common, people that we knew, places that we'd been, and exchange contacts and said, hey, let's have coffee, let's have breakfast, let's do something together. So lunch didn't work out, we had to move it. Anyways, we ended up having breakfast this morning. And I want to keep reusing this example. It will come back out throughout this episode for items that I'll share with you because you can do the same thing. Now, as usual, before you go further in this episode, like, subscribe, share it with a friend. Regardless of where they're at in their investing journey, they'll be able to take some golden nuggets out of it. So, out of the 3 important parts that I want to share with you, the first one is really the power of growing your network. As I've said hundreds of times on this podcast, real estate is a relationship based business. It's an industry where the links you have with people make a significant difference, because think about it. Yeah, you're investing in a box that generates income, but at the end of the day, you are dealing with a broker, you're dealing with a financier, you're dealing with a banker, you're dealing with tenants, with lawyers, with notaries. You just deal with people. You actually never deal with the brick and the shingles themselves, even though they're the support to generate this income. So never neglect all those relationships, and always treat others the way you'd like to be treated, because further down the line, at some point, need something from these people. And it's not a question of need. It's just that you want to put good out in the world, because good will come back to you. Now, it's important to identify in growing your network, where is it that you're at right now, and what is it that you need? So, for example, if you're short on capital, well, maybe you need to meet some investors, some partners, people who can contribute financially. And in some cases, like most cases at the beginning, it's love money. And love money might be someone from your family, someone that you already have a relationship with, or even a coworker in some ways, that from a previous job, and you've stayed in touch, and you both share this love for real estate, and you're just a bit further down the journey. You happen to have a property under contract, and hey, don't be shy to ask them. So identify where you're at and what is it that you need to grow. I had a conversation yesterday with a gentleman who's got already 2 deals under his belt. He's built a fairly good team of people around himself, but he was saying that he needs more deal flow. He needs more pipeline, and there's certain things he can do himself. And I was like, well, why don't you meet and network more with brokers who are dealing in the type of assets that you're looking for? In his case, it was multifamily. So, same thing. Identify the top 5 that you like to work with and get them to send you deals, or maybe just one. You don't need 5. You just need one good one, and build that relationship. But throughout the real estate investing journey, you will have to work with other types of people. I'm thinking insurance brokers. I'm thinking inspectors, evaluators. And so, yeah, especially, for example, the inspectors, you really just need them when you're under contract and you're about to close. But nothing stops you from giving them a call, or meeting one of them, or calling back the guy that you dealt with 2 years ago, and keep building your network. Now, in building your network, you have to be proactive. You have to do it with intent. And so, as I've already shared here, Like for example, go and attend networking events. So nowadays, there's some events that are in person. There are some of them that are virtual and online. They both have advantages and disadvantages. At some point, people got really tired of online events because remember during COVID, that's all we could do, and there's a huge push to go back in person. I really like in person as well, but sometimes now I tend to go back on in virtual. And I attended something today that was really interesting by three fund managers in the U.S. and they talked a lot about the U.S. economy and oil prices and how it's affecting investment choices. And it's an event that I would have never been able to attend. Otherwise, I would have had to go to California and New York. So there is both that you should attend. Obviously, locally, try to do as much as possible in person. And when I say you have to be intentional about it, when you go over there, actually have a goal. Hey, today I want to meet three mortgage brokers. And by the end of the day, I want to have their contact information and I want them to answer my question about this technicality on the CMHC financing process. You go there with a mission. And as you talk to people like, hey, do you know anybody here who specializes in CMHC financing? I have some questions. Oh, yeah, you haven't met Bob yet? Let me introduce you. And so this also leads me to when you attend events, there's different ways to think about it. And I know a lot of people who go over there, they look at the crowd and they say, who here can do something for me? And I'm sorry to say, but if that's the way you think, you're thinking in the wrong way. When you go to an event and you're at the door and you see a crowd of 30 people, you should be thinking, what can I do for them? How can I help you? Who can I connect you with? Because one of my favorite things is walking into a room of 30 where I don't know anyone and you start a conversation and you start another conversation. By the third conversation, most likely you can connect this third person to the first person. And what I love to do is actually be like, oh, wait, it's funny that you say that, Nancy, because I just spoke to Bob right over here. Let me go get him. And he just mentioned that he knows someone who's an expert in this. Wait, hold on a second. Hey, I just want to make sure you guys meet because you're wondering about this and he knows an expert in that. Maybe there's something to do. And yet, even though I'm not the expert in the professional they're looking for, the fact that I connected them, they will always remember me as the guy who put them in touch. And that's absolutely beautiful. And in addition to attending in-person networking events, you can also reach out to people on social media. LinkedIn in particular is a fabulous way to do this. It's for professionals. It's more serious than Facebook and Instagram, that's for sure. And you can actually reach quality professionals, and because they advertise themselves as what is it that they do. So connect with brokers, connect with inspectors and appraisers. Go for it. Now, you have to be practical in how you maintain those relationships because you meet someone at a networking event, they give you their card, like, oh, yeah, if you have any questions about architecture, call me. You actually have to call them. You actually, we all say, oh, yeah, let's go grab coffee and stuff. And then sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Grabbing coffee is just a reason. You can meet on a bench and share a box of chocolates if you want. That's already great. And I think in some ways it's a lot more meaningful. You can go for lunch, you can go for dinner. But once you've had, let's say, this initial touch point, how do you maintain this? In some cases, you're looking for a professional to work with. So it'll maybe kickstart a professional interaction, a transaction of some kind. And sometimes it's not. And I just want to share with you a tip and an example on something that I do is that last time I was reading an article, it made me think of someone. I actually stopped what I was doing. I pressed, because it's so easy to share. I actually pressed the share, the little arrow towards the top, and I emailed it to someone, to an investor that I'd spoken about, it was on that specific topic. And I said, hey man, I was reading this. It made me think of you. I just wanted to share. How are you doing? Boom. It literally, not even 30 seconds. And then the person wrote back to me, oh my God, thank you for thinking of me. Yeah. Oh, this is going well. He gave me an update on his project and so on and so forth. And this is just an example to share that it doesn't take much to maintain relationships. And another fun tip is, we tend to meet people and then it's hot. And then we talk 2-3 times in a couple of weeks and then it kind of dies off and stuff like that. And so what I do sometimes is that I go back in my phone at the bottom of all my texts And this is where I start, not at the top, not at the bottom, because they're the longest interactions that I didn't have. So I go back and sometimes I delete. And then sometimes like, oh my God, it's been 6 months. Like, hey, how are you doing? Um, what happened since we've been chatting? And then go from the bottom of your list to, I was gonna say, reheat those relationships, and then yeah, start again. Like, hey, I'm gonna be passing by your office pretty soon. I'll drop by, or hey, give me an update on your project. Just ask a few questions, show interest, and the same thing should be rolling off your tongue. How can I help you? When you build value for others first, it will always come back to you somehow, somewhere in the long run. And when I wake up in the morning, I want to contribute to the world more than I take. That's just my 2 cents on it. Now, I'm glad to share these examples about how to grow your network, the power of growing your network. And so, in the introduction, I shared like this morning I had breakfast with a gentleman. We met at an event. We had a few common points. And as I've shared many times on this podcast, I have a project, a big development project. I bought two pieces of land to do a 16 unit. I bought the third land next door. I've had now at 43 units approved. And now with things that are happening, I'm probably going to be around 70 when I finish. Now, I was sharing about this, and he's like, actually, I could be interested, and I'm meeting with some friends tonight. And then we ended up talking about the project for a half hour. He asked me a bunch of questions, and maybe he'll participate. I don't know. I'll let you know. But he's going to connect me to people who might be interested. And so now he's like a gateway to other people that I wouldn't have met because they're not part of my network. They're part of his network. And that's where our two circles overlapped. And then he's going to make the connection to someone in his network. And then I'm going to go and be able to go and meet with this third person. And maybe this third person is going to say, this project is too big or too small or too whatever, but I know someone who does. So then he'll introduce me. And so you kind of keep going down the chain with always, well, being very grateful to how it started, and then actually meet and maintain all those relationships. So real estate is a people business. You have to invest in relationships. Now, the third big pillar and point that I want to share with you today is connected to the first one, is that as you grow your network, you actually need to make a commitment to constant education. You need to learn all the time. I don't care how high you got, how low you are, how successful you've been. I don't care the asset class. Guess what? The market changes every day. Regulations and laws evolve every quarter. Financing changes every month. The CMHC changes their policies. The banks change their policies and the terms. The interest rates change. The market evolves. Consumer demand evolves. I was speaking to a builder yesterday. He was telling me what I built 20 years ago is not adapted anymore to today's demand. And that was like he built high rises. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, parking has changed. The ratios aren't the same. People's lifestyle has changed. Now they're okay. Think of, what was built 20 years ago and some of the current construction. I'll pick an example in Griffintown where people are fine living in a 600 square foot unit but they have 1,200 square foot in common space that they get to use, and they're okay to pay for that. Back in the day, it wasn't like that. It was in their unit. If it's not there, not using it. People's demand have changed. So you constantly need to keep learning. Now, you learn through attending real estate events. You learn through books, through podcasts like this one. Thank you for listening. You learn through courses, webinars, seminars. Sometimes you learn with just having a conversation with the dog owner next to you because he's a professional in XYZ, and you ended up striking a conversation and you learned something. Like, you have to stay up to date. And as basic as they may sound, in your head, you actually need to make the commitment that you will take the steps to keep being informed. And I've shared many times, my wife is a tax lawyer. She's been on the show numerous times. And I can't share with you enough how many times she said, Axel, every year the budget changes. Every quarter, some of the rules change. And every year, absolutely, there's actually a major overhaul. So yesterday she received like the law, the new book that they publish every year. That's literally about 3 bricks as high. And it's like, yeah. And throughout this, there's been a lot of changes. And so that's just one profession. It's tax law. And you're gonna say, ah, that's such an extreme. The world changes. And if you don't stay up to date, you know what happens? You fall behind. And you don't want that. Now, in building your knowledge and keeping learning, you actually need to build yourself a routine. And so I made the commitment a while ago that, when I'm in the car, I'm going to try to use this time. So first of all, I try to do as many phone calls as I can because I can stale manage to focus on the road and have a meaningful conversation. I've never had an accident, knock on wood. Now, if I'm not on phone calls, I listen to books. I've really restarted. So tons of podcasts, and then I've listened to books. And there's some books that I've listened to more than once in the car. I really like them. And so we live in Sud-Ouest. We have a property in Laval. When I have to go back and forth, it's an hour. That's 2 chapters of a book that otherwise I would have done nothing in the car. And I'm so happy to be spending this time learning, listening. Makes me think. Sometimes I actually pause. I listen. I think about it. I restart. I rephrase. So create yourself a knowledge routine. Okay. One, ask other people, hey, what kind of podcasts are you listening to? What are the top 3 books that you've read recently that you would recommend? And so you can do that on weekly basis, on daily basis. I know people that try to read a little bit, 15 minutes every morning when they wake up. Me, that's not something I've worked into my routine because of my schedule. But I do it in the car, whatever fits your case. Now, we all know the fear of certain investors, like, oh, I'd like to start, or I bought this first property, but then when I listen to people's obstacles in achieving their goals, it's a lot based on fear. And a lot of that fear is actually attributing a huge probability that something that's highly unlikely to happen. I'll give you an example. I had someone say to me, "Yeah, I want to buy this place. Like, maybe I was thinking of Hochelaga Maisonneuve, but there's a lot of properties over there, and I don't know what to do. And if, let's say, there's a flood, or if the roof collapses." And I was looking at them being, kind of shocked, being like, "The roof collapses? Like, how many times have you heard this happen around you or in the paper?" I've read once an article in the paper where it happened on a ruin and no one was hurt. How likely is it to happen? If that's the fear that's blocking you, I think there's definitely something else behind it. And the point I want to make is that, to me, a lot of those fears actually reflect a lack of knowledge. And the lack of knowledge can be fought through constant education. I've shared, many times on this podcast, when I started with our first 5plex in Lachine, I actually force fed myself hundreds of podcast episodes from the bigger pockets in the US. I listened to hundreds of episodes, and I still claim that I earned a master's degree in real estate investing by listening to that show. I still recommend it to you. And that was how I built some of my knowledge. Now, the lack of knowledge can be costly. It can be costly because you don't start investing, or you start 3 years later, and in 3 years the market already appreciated by 20%. So if you would have bought a property, for $1 million, you'd already build 200K in equity over 3 years, just in equity. So that fear actually is costing you. Now, the last big part I want to share with you is stepping out of your comfort zone. And I know it sounds cliche. Oh my God, you should take more risk. You should step out of your comfort zone, and so on and so forth. But you know what? Real estate investing is a fabulous investment vehicle. And you're right, it's inherently a bit risky. And growing an investment portfolio requires pushing your own boundaries. Yeah. And this is where, by growing your network and having a good group of people around you, by constantly learning, you're able to push your boundaries because you're more confident. Now, if you only bought a duplex, don't go and try to buy a high rise for 25 floors. That's going to be a hard jump. That's a given. However, to try to almost, double your property size every year, You bought a duplex, then you try to buy a fourplex, and the fourplex you try to buy an eightplex. It's actually called the stack. It's an investment method like the pyramid where you try to double your unit size every year, so it gets harder and harder. But if you do it for a couple of years, I mean, you're almost set for life. Um, Pushing your boundaries. Now, what is your comfort zone? To me, it's what is it that you find that's easy, that you understand? If you keep buying in an asset class that you're so confident in, I mean, good for you if you close, 6 properties a year. Is just that at some point you could try to do a little bit bigger. Not necessarily change the market. If you're comfortable in a certain market, stay in that market. But instead of only buying duplexes, go buy a sixplex. And if you only buy sixplexes, go buy a 12 units or an 8 units or something just a little bit different, because stepping out of your comfort zone will push you to learn more. It will boost your confidence. It's scary. It's a bit hard. Now, you're going to get uncomfortable when you come out of your comfort zone naturally. Now, the more uncomfortable you get, the more you're going to have to learn quickly. And sometimes you can again educate yourself on negotiation tips, on skills to pitch your deals, on crunching different property types in different ways so you can really understand and take a calculated risk. There are so many ways in which you can minimize the risk that you take by educating yourself, but yet you still get to push your boundary and your discomfort further and further and further. In my case, when I think about it, 5 years ago, I started with a 5 unit in Lachine that I partly renovated myself, and the whole cycle took almost a year and a half. And now I'm working on projects where I'm developing potentially a 70 to 80 unit building. There's a lot of deals that have happened. I've spent hundreds of hours investing in myself, in learning, in growing, in stepping out of my comfort zone, and thinking like sometimes I feel like I tried to take way too big of a bite. But you know what? If I didn't push myself, maybe I'd just still be buying fiveplexes in Lachine. And again, there's nothing wrong with buying fiveplexes in Lachine. Don't get me wrong. It's just that I want to be true to my growth desire, and my growth desire is going through this, is stepping out of my comfort zone. And where it's pushed me, I mentioned like the, skills to pitch. Lately, as I shared, last week, I had some really good news from the city. I'm going to be able to add more density. Listen to last week's episode. And now I've gone back to every major developer that I've pitched to do a second round to be like, hey, the project got a whole lot better. We should really look at this again. Here's the new pro forma. Here's what we're going to be able to do. Here are the new numbers. And over the last 2 weeks, I ended up sitting down with some substantially large developers whose name and you see on the streets almost on a weekly basis. And I'm really proud of that, because even 2 years ago, I don't think I would have had the courage to go and request a meeting and present the deal. And in a lot of cases, it's interesting. Let's think about it. Let's see how it goes. But I know that just getting in front of these people is a major step for me, because it got me out of my comfort zone. And maybe it's not this deal that I'll do with them. It'll be a different one. But it got me to meet new people, grow my network. It got me to learn fast because I had to. It's getting me to new possibilities and ventures. It got me to explore new markets. It got me to use more creative financing and see how we can make this work together, because I was trying to create some win-win deals. Now, the hard part about stepping out of your comfort zone is that it takes more time. Sometimes sometimes you fail. And if you fail, it's okay. Just embrace it, because embracing failure as a part of your growth will actually help you. And this is something that I've held on to in the past of like, oh, it didn't work out. I just can't let it go. No, fail, as they say at Facebook, fail, but fail fast and fail forward. Learn from it, move on, get back up and keep going and try differently. And your ability to turn this around as quickly as possible will be beneficial to you. Now, I just shared how I went back in front of all those developers. Even if it works out with the 30th that I pitch, every of those 29 presentation got me closer to a yes. Every feedback that I got out of those 29 first conversations and presentation got me sharper for my 30th who said yes. So it's never a no. It's never a failure. You learn something, keep moving forward. Step out of your comfort zone. Now I know grow your network, the constantly learn, and the step out of your comfort zone. You might have already heard this. It's just that so many people drown in inaction. So, small steps, okay? Pick up a new book and make a commitment to read 20 pages for 5 days straight, because by then you'll be hooked on the book and you'll just want to finish it the day after, okay? When you're in the car, stop dozing, put Audible, pick 3 books that you like. It doesn't have to be real estate, investing, by the way. It could be on personal development. It can be on sports achievements. It could be, I love listening to biographies and like listening to like how really successful people did stuff and ran their lives. And it doesn't have to be real estate investors. Like I listened to one recently. It was like a politician. Super interesting. Now, take action. Small daily action compounded makes the difference. And on this wonderful note, you're going to share this episode with 2 or 3 friends that could benefit from this conversation. And if you don't, next time I see you at an event, first, you're going to come and introduce yourself. And then 2, I might give you a little bit of a kick in the butt for not doing more, because you have more potential than you think you do. You're just not pushing yourself hard enough. On this note, as usual, keep researching your market, make some offers. I'll talk to you next week.